A 4-year-old beggar girl gets slapped for trying to eat leftover burger, but a millionaire was on the park bench and something happens. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The morning sun was already warming the stones of Central Park in Willow Creek when the small, dirty hand reached towards the trash can of the diner. Emily, just 4 years old, had messy brown hair and a faded blue dress that had been white in better days. Her big dark eyes gleamed with the hope of finding something to quell the hunger that had been growing in her belly since the day before. "Get out of here, you little pest!" The harsh shout of Tony, owner of Tony's Diner, cut through the morning air like a razor. The man in his late 40s, with a prominent belly and sweat on his brow, emerged from behind the counter with his face red with irritation. "How many times do I have to tell you not to mess with my trash?" The girl cowered, but didn't let go of the piece of bun she had managed to grab. Her little hands trembled, not just from fear, but from weakness. It had been a long time since a complete meal had passed her lips. "Leave her alone, Tony. She's just a kid," tried to intervene Mrs. Gable, the elderly woman who sold flowers on the corner of the park, but her voice sounded weak and distant. "Kid nothing. She's a plague that only brings dirt to my establishment," Tony snarled, approaching Emily dangerously. "The customers have already complained. This isn't a place for beggars." The man's hand rose in the air, and the slap that landed on the girl's face echoed through the almost empty park. Emily fell backward, the bun flying from her hands and rolling back into the gutter. Tears welled up instantly, but she didn't cry out loud. She had learned that shouting only brought more trouble. From the wooden bench near the fountain, where a collection of pigeons gathered waiting for morning crumbs, Theodore Mitchell watched the whole scene with a heavy heart. At 68 years old, he carried on his shoulders the experience of a lifetime of business achievements, but also the weight of losses that had never completely healed. His grey hair was always well combed, and his simple but well cared for clothes betrayed a man who, even in retirement, maintained certain standards. He had moved to Willow Creek, a small town in upstate New York, 3 months ago, seeking the peace he so desired after selling his trucking company in New York City. Every day at 7 in the morning, he sat on that same bench to feed the pigeons, a routine that helped him fill the voids of a life that, despite all his wealth, had become desperately lonely. But he had never witnessed anything like that. "Hey!" Theodore's voice sounded firm and authoritative, carrying the same force he used in board meetings decades ago. Tony turned around, surprised by the intervention. "That's no way to treat a child." "Oh, it's the retired gentleman," Tony said with a forced smile, completely changing his tone. Theodore was known in town as a man of means, and local merchants always made a point of maintaining good relations with potential customers. "Sorry for the noise, but this girl is always bothering people. She has no manners at all." Theodore slowly rose from the bench, his eyes never leaving Emily, who remained huddled on the ground, a hand on her red face where she had been slapped. Something stirred within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, a mixture of indignation and protectiveness that awakened dormant feelings. "Manners are taught with patience, not with violence," Theodore said, walking towards the girl. "And a child's hunger is not a reason for humiliation." Tony opened his mouth to respond, but something in the older man's gaze made him recoil. There was a natural authority in Theodore that decades of business leadership had solidified, and even in retirement, that power still emanated from him. Theodore crouched down next to Emily, who watched him with wide, still damp eyes. He took a clean handkerchief from his pocket and extended it to her. "What's your name, little one?" "Emily," she whispered, accepting the handkerchief with hesitant fingers. "That's a pretty name. Are you hungry?" The girl nodded shyly. Theodore looked back and saw that Tony had disappeared inside the diner, probably waiting for the situation to resolve itself. "Let's get you something to eat," Theodore said, extending his hand. "Something decent, made with care." Emily hesitated for a moment, looking at the outstretched hand. It was bigger than hers, with prominent veins and some age spots, but it had something safe and warm that made her trust him. Slowly, she placed her little hand in his. Theodore led her to a table on the diner's porch and called Tony, who appeared with an obsequious smile plastered on his face. "I want a fully loaded sandwich with cheese, ham and lettuce and a fresh orange juice," Theodore ordered, his voice leaving no room for discussion. "And make it with care." Of course. Just a minute," Tony said, rushing to the kitchen. While they waited, Theodore observed Emily more closely. Her clothes were clean, despite being worn, and her hair, although messy, showed signs of care. Someone was trying to take care of her, even with limited resources. "Do you live here in town?" "Yes, I live with my Aunt Carol," Emily replied, her voice still low. "She works cleaning houses. She said that today there's no money for food, but maybe there will be tomorrow." Theodore's heart tightened even more. Carol, that name sounded familiar to him, although he couldn't quite place where he had heard it. "And where do you live?" "On the street behind the church, in a little house. Aunt Carol said it's just temporary, until she gets a better job." Tony returned with the sandwich and juice, serving them with exaggerated courtesy. Theodore paid without questioning the price, and watched Emily devour the food, with a hunger that showed that regular meals were not guaranteed in her life. "Emily," Theodore said gently, "could you take me to Aunt Carol? I'd like to talk to her." The girl stopped eating and looked at him with apprehension. "She didn't do anything wrong. She takes good care of me." "I know she does. I can see that by the way you talk about her. I just want to meet her, maybe help you too." There was a sincerity in Theodore's gaze that reassured Emily. She finished eating and guided him through the narrow streets of Willow Creek, passing by simple houses with colonial architecture until they reached an alley behind the First Presbyterian Church. The house was more of a room than a residence, a small and old construction with peeling walls and a wooden door that had seen better days. Theodore felt a pang in his chest as he imagined two people living in that cramped space. Emily knocked on the door with her small fists. "Aunt Carol! Aunt Carol!" The door opened, revealing a young woman, approximately 35 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a simple bun and tired eyes that immediately filled with concern when she saw Emily accompanied by a stranger. "Emily, where were you?" "I told you not to leave the house." Carol knelt down to the girl's level, checking to see if she was okay, before raising her eyes to Theodore with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. The meeting of those eyes created a moment of silence, charged with meaning that neither of them yet understood, but that would forever change the course of their lives. Carol Adams rose slowly, keeping Emily close to her while she studied the man before her. Her instincts, sharpened by years of survival and protecting the girl, were on high alert. Well-dressed men at her door never meant good news. "Sorry to bother you," Theodore said, taking off his hat in a gesture of courtesy that Carol didn't expect. "My name is Theodore Mitchell. I just helped Emily in the park, and she brought me here." Carol's eyes narrowed as she examined Emily for signs of injury or trouble. It was then that she noticed the red mark on the girl's face, still visible despite the time that had passed. "What happened?" Her voice came out louder than she intended, laden with a fear that she was trying to hide. "Emily, what happened to your face?" "The man at the diner hit me because I took a bun from the trash," Emily said with the brutal honesty of children. "But Mr. Mitchell defended me and gave me a yummy sandwich." Carol felt the blood boil in her veins. Her hands trembled with anger and helplessness, the same helplessness that had accompanied her since she took responsibility for caring for Emily 2 years ago. How could a single woman, without family, without resources, protect a child in a world that always seemed to be against them? "I'm so sorry that happened," Theodore said, perceiving the whirlwind of emotions that was passing over Carol's face. Tony was rude and violent. "No child should have to go through that." Thank you for helping her, Carol replied, her voice controlled but tense. But now we need to go inside. I have to leave for work. She started to guide Emily into the house, but Theodore took a step forward. Please, wait a moment, I'd like to propose something. Carol stopped, but didn't turn around. What kind of proposal? I'm new to town. I bought a house at the entrance of Willow Creek, and I need someone to do the cleaning and organization. I pay well, and the work would be regular. Now Carol turned completely, her eyes searching for any sign of lying or bad intentions on the man's face. She had learned to distrust proposals that seemed too good to be true. How much? The question came out direct, without beating around the bush. Carol didn't have time for niceties when it came to survival. $300 a week, plus transportation allowance, 3 times a week, full mornings. The amount made Carol blink several times. It was almost double what she could earn, cleaning 3 different houses, running from one side of town to the other, taking Emily in tow when she had no one to leave her with. Why me? She asked, still suspicious. You don't even know me. Theodore hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. The truth was that something about that duo had awakened in him a need to help that he couldn't explain. The way Carol protected Emily, even though she was clearly younger than he had imagined, the dignity she maintained despite the difficult circumstances, and especially the girl's eyes, there was something familiar in them that he couldn't identify. Because I can see that you're a good person trying to do the best for Emily, he said finally. And because every mother deserves the chance to give a better life to her child. I'm not her mother, Carol corrected quickly. I take care of her. Sorry, I didn't mean to assume anything wrong. Carol looked at Emily, who was watching the conversation with wide, curious eyes. The girl didn't fully understand what was being discussed, but she could feel the tension in the air. Can I think about your proposal? Of course, my house is on Palm Street, number 42. It's the blue house with the white gate. If you decide to accept, you can show up tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Theodore turned to leave, but stopped and looked at Emily. Little one, do you like books? Emily nodded enthusiastically. Aunt Carol shows me the pictures in the church books sometimes. I have many books at home. If your aunt agrees to work for me, maybe you can see some of them. After Theodore walked away, Carol went into the house with Emily and closed the door. The room was too small to hide the despair she had been feeling for weeks. On the old wooden table were scattered the overdue bills, rent, electricity, water, and in the corner, the cookie tin where she kept her savings was practically empty. Aunt Carol, are you going to work for the nice man? Asked Emily, sitting on the only bed they shared. I don't know yet, honey, I need to think. But the truth was that Carol had no choice. The landlord had stopped by the previous week threatening eviction. The family she cleaned houses for were traveling, leaving her without work for at least 2 weeks, and Emily needed to eat every day. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Carol sat in the only chair in the house and allowed herself to cry silently. At 35 years old, she felt much older. She had grown up in the St. Clair orphanage in a neighboring town, and since she was 18, she had struggled to survive alone. She had never known family. She had never had someone to count on in difficult times. Finding Emily in the church, abandoned and crying, had been both a blessing and a challenge that tested all her limits. The girl had brought purpose to her life, but also responsibilities that sometimes seemed impossible to fulfill. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Theodore was sitting on the porch of his new house, looking at the mountains that surrounded Willow Creek. The property was simple, but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a large living room, a spacious kitchen, and a backyard with fruit trees. He had bought it more for the isolation it offered than for the need for space. Since the departure of his wife Claire 3 years ago, Theodore had become a lonely man. They had tried to have children for years, gone through treatments, consulted doctors, prayed in churches, but they never succeeded. The pain of this impossibility had created a distance between them that, even with love, they had never been able to completely overcome. When Claire was gone, a victim of cancer that appeared and progressed rapidly, Theodore found himself alone in an empty mansion in New York City, surrounded by employees but without family. It was then that he decided to sell everything and seek peace in the countryside. But the peace he found in Willow Creek had been disturbed that morning. First by the gratuitous violence against an innocent child, then by the encounter with Carol and Emily. There was something about those two that stirred feelings that he had buried deeply. The birthmark he had noticed on Emily's arm, in the shape of a star, was identical to the one his daughter would have had. The child that Claire lost still in the first trimester of pregnancy 25 years ago would be exactly Carol's age now. Theodore shook his head, pushing away thoughts that he knew were just a product of his loneliness and the desire to have a family. But he couldn't get Emily's eyes out of his mind when she looked at him with trust, or the way Carol protected her with a maternal ferocity that deeply moved him. The next morning at 8 o'clock sharp, Carol was standing in front of the gate of the Blue House, holding Emily's hand. She had spent the night awake, weighing pros and cons, but in the end, necessity had spoken louder than distrust. Theodore opened the gate with a genuine smile. "Have you decided to accept?" "I need the job," Carol said honestly, "but I have conditions." "I'm listening." "Emily comes with me. I have no one to leave her with." "Of course. The house is big. She'll have room to play. And I want to be paid weekly." "No problem." Carol nodded, still hesitant. "Then let's try it." As they entered the house, Emily let out a small gasp of admiration. It was the most beautiful house she had ever seen, with wooden furniture, colorful curtains, and shelves full of books. Her eyes sparkled when she saw the makeshift library in the living room. "You can look at the books, but carefully," Theodore said, noticing the girl's interest. While Emily was enchanted with the illustrated books, Carol began to work with an efficiency that impressed Theodore. Her movements were precise, careful, and she treated each object as if it were precious. There was something about watching her work that brought a sense of home that Theodore hadn't felt in years. And when he saw Emily sitting on the floor, reading a picture book to herself, inventing stories for each image, he felt that perhaps fate had specific reasons for having brought him to Willow Creek. What none of the three knew was that this would be just the first morning of a journey that would reveal secrets buried for decades and forever change the meaning of the word family in their lives. 3 weeks had passed since Carol started working at Theodore's house, and a comfortable routine had been established among the three. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 in the morning, Carol and Emily walked along Palm Street to the Blue House, where they spent the mornings in a harmony that none of them had experienced before. Theodore discovered that watching Carol work had become one of his favorite parts of the day. She had a particular way of organizing things, always leaving small, personal touches that made the house seem more welcoming. Flowers from the yard in small vases, curtains opened in a way that made better use of the natural light, books reorganized not only by size, but by colors that created a more harmonious visual. "You have a natural talent for this," he commented one morning, watching her arrange the pillows on the sofa in a way he had never thought of. Carol stopped what she was doing and looked at him in surprise. Compliments were not a common thing in her life. "It's just basic organization." "No, it's more than that. You have an aesthetic eye. Have you ever thought about working with interior design?" A bitter laugh escaped Carol's lips. "Mr. Mitchell, I barely finished junior high. These things are for people who have had opportunities that I never had." "Intelligence isn't measured just by diplomas," Theodore said gently. "And opportunities can be created." While the two were talking, Emily was sitting on the living room rug, surrounded by children's books that Theodore had bought especially for her in recent weeks. The girl had shown a hunger for stories that impressed him, always asking him to read just one more chapter, one more fable. "Uncle Theodore," said Emily, using the affectionate title she had naturally adopted, "why do the letters make different sounds?" Theodore approached and sat on the floor next to her, something that his 68 years of age made increasingly challenging, but that he did with pleasure. "Do you want to learn to read for real?" Emily's eyes sparkled. "Can I?" "Of course you can. How about we start today?" Carol stopped folding clothes and watched the interaction. There was something in the way Theodore looked at Emily that touched her deeply, but also worried her. What if he got tired of them? What if one day he decided he didn't need their services anymore? Life had taught her that good things usually didn't last long. During the next hour, Theodore taught Emily the first letters of the alphabet, drawing them in a notebook and showing how they formed simple words. The girl absorbed everything with a speed that impressed him. "She's very smart," he commented to Carol when Emily went out to play in the yard. "She always has been. Since she was little, she paid attention to everything, asked questions that I didn't know how to answer." "Have you ever thought about putting her in school?" Carol felt a lump in her throat. "Of course I've thought about it, but school costs money, supplies, uniform, lunch. These are things that don't fit in my budget." Theodore nodded, understanding the frustration in her voice. "And you, have you ever thought about going back to school?" "What for?" The question came out more aggressively than Carol intended. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "You don't need to apologize, but I believe it's never too late to learn new things. I myself was a teacher before I became a businessman." "Teacher of what?" "Math. I taught for 10 years before starting my trucking company." Carol processed this information in silence. Every day she discovered something new about Theodore that made him more interesting and mysterious. A rich man who had been a teacher, who moved alone to a small town, who treated a cleaning lady and an abandoned girl as if they were important people. "Why did you move here?" she asked, curious. Theodore was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window where Emily was chasing butterflies in the yard. "After my wife passed away, the house in New York City became too big for just one person, and too noisy, even empty. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. She was special. We tried to have children for many years, but we never succeeded. When she was gone, I realized that I was alone in a way that I had never experienced before." Carol felt a pang of identification. Loneliness was something she knew well. "It must be hard." "It is. But you two have brought life to this house in a way that I didn't expect." The comment made Carol feel uncomfortable, not because of the kindness, but because of the possibility of emotional dependence that it implied. She had learned not to count on anyone but herself. That afternoon, after Carol and Emily had left, Theodore stayed in the living room, observing the toys that Emily had left organized in a corner, the books marked on the pages where they had stopped reading, the small evidence that that house had become, temporarily, home for a family. It was then that he noticed something that made him stop breathing for a moment. In the notebook where he had taught Emily to write, she had drawn a small star next to her name. A star identical to the birthmark on her arm, which he had noticed a few times when she was wearing short sleeves. Theodore sat heavily in the armchair, a painful memory coming to the surface. Claire had lost a baby in the first trimester of pregnancy, 25 years ago. The doctors had said that the child, if it had been born, would have a hereditary birthmark in the shape of a star, the same one that Claire's mother had, and that she also possessed. Could it just be a coincidence? Theodore tried to push those thoughts away. The pain of the loss had been so great that he and Claire never tried to have children again. But now, observing that star drawn by a 4-year-old girl, he felt as if fate was playing a cruel trick on his memory. Meanwhile, in the small house behind the church, Carol counted coins on the table for the 3rd time. Theodore's payment had significantly alleviated her financial situation, but the overdue bills were still a mountain that seemed impossible to climb. "Aunt Carol, are you sad?" asked Emily, approaching with one of the books that Theodore had lent her to take home. "No, honey, I'm just organizing our things." "Uncle Theodore is nice, isn't he?" "Yes, he is. He said that tomorrow he's going to teach me to write my full name." Carol smiled, but felt a growing concern. Emily was becoming attached to Theodore in a way that could be problematic in the future. What if he moved again? What if he decided he didn't need their services anymore? The girl would suffer, and Carol couldn't bear the idea of seeing Emily go through another loss. "Emily, do you remember what it was like before we met Uncle Theodore?" "I remember. You worked a lot and sometimes we didn't have food. And we were okay even then, weren't we?" Emily nodded, but her eyes showed confusion. "Why are you asking that? Just so you know that, if things ever change, we'll both be okay. Always." "But why will things change?" Carol sighed. How to explain to a 4-year-old the fears that haunted her? How to talk about the impermanence of good things when you grew up learning that they always end? Sometimes things change, and we can't control that. But what matters is that we'll always take care of each other. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Carol allowed herself a moment of dreaming. She imagined what it would be like if she could really go back to school, maybe take an interior design course, as Theodore had suggested. She imagined Emily in school, learning to read and write with real teachers, making friends, having a normal childhood. But she soon pushed those thoughts away. Dreams were dangerous when you didn't have the structure to realize them. And Carol had learned the hard way that trusting too much in the goodness of others was a guaranteed way to be disappointed. What she didn't know was that on the other side of town, Theodore was making a decision that would completely change the course of their lives. A decision motivated not only by kindness, but by an intuition that he couldn't explain. A feeling that fate had placed those two people in his path for a very specific reason. And that reason was about to reveal itself in a way that none of the three could imagine. The discovery that would change everything began in a seemingly innocent way on a Thursday morning. Theodore had decided to organize the old documents he had brought from New York City, papers that had remained in boxes since the move. Among business contracts and deeds, he found a yellowed folder that he hadn't seen in years. Inside it were Claire's medical documents, exams, prescriptions, and a series of papers related to the pregnancy she had lost. Theodore hesitated before opening it, knowing that reliving those moments would be painful, but something compelled him to continue. It was then that he found something that made his world stop. A hospital document that he had never seen before, with the stamp "Information Correction" at the top. The paper, dated 6 months after the supposed loss of the baby, contained information that contradicted everything he had been told. According to the document, the child had not died in the womb. It had been born alive, but with health problems that required special care. The record showed that she had been transferred to another hospital for intensive treatment, and then there were no more records. Theodore sat heavily in the chair, his hands trembling as he read and reread the document. Claire had never seen that paper. She had never known that her daughter had been born alive. How was that possible? With his heart racing, he continued searching in the folder and found another sealed envelope with his name written by hand. Inside, a letter from Nurse Berenice Fonseca, a nurse from the hospital whom he knew superficially at the time. "Mr. Theodore," the letter said, "if you are reading this, you have probably already found the documents about your daughter. I didn't have the courage to tell you at the time, but your wife was very fragile, and the doctors thought it best that she believed that the baby had passed away. The truth is that your daughter was born premature, but healthy. She was given up for irregular adoption by Sister Catherine from the ward, who had contacts with an orphanage. I kept these papers all these years, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Your daughter would be 25 years old now, and may be anywhere. I'm sorry for having participated in this lie." Theodore read the letter 3 times, each word hammering in his mind like physical blows. His daughter was alive. There was a child, now an adult, somewhere in the world who was his family and never knew it. While processing this devastating revelation, his mind inevitably returned to Carol, 25 years old, raised in an orphanage, without knowledge about her biological family, the physical resemblance to Claire that he had noticed but never commented on, and mainly Emily's birthmark, identical to the one that his family carried for generations. That morning, when Carol arrived to work, Theodore was different. She immediately realized that something had changed. He was quieter, observing her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Did something happen?" she asked, noticing the papers scattered on the living room table. "Carol, I need to ask you some personal questions. Do you mind?" "It depends on the questions," she replied cautiously. "Where exactly did you grow up?" "At the St. Clair Orphanage in Springfield." "Why?" Theodore's heart raced. Springfield was only 2 hours from New York City. "And do you know anything about how you got there?" Carol stopped folding the clothes she was organizing. "Why are you asking me this?" "Please, it's important." "I was told that I was left there when I was a baby, just a few days old. I never knew anything about my parents." Her voice carried an old pain, scarred, but still sensitive. "Why are you asking these questions?" Theodore looked at Emily, who was playing quietly in the yard, oblivious to the conversation that could change her life forever. "Carol, do you remember Sister Catherine?" Carol's face paled. "How do you know that name?" "Answer, please." "Sister Catherine was the nurse who took care of the babies at the orphanage. She left when I was about 5 years old." "Why are you asking me about her?" The pieces fit together so perfectly that Theodore felt dizzy. But he couldn't accuse without being sure. The life of that woman, and of Emily, couldn't be turned upside down based only on suspicions. "Sorry for the strange questions. I'm organizing old papers and some names seemed familiar." Carol didn't believe the explanation, but decided not to push. She had learned that excessive curiosity about the lives of employers usually didn't end well for employees like her. However, the seed of doubt had been planted in her mind as well. The way Theodore looked at her sometimes, the comments about her natural intelligence, the special interest in Emily, was it all just kindness from a lonely man? That afternoon, after Carol and Emily had left, Theodore picked up the phone and called Berenice Fonseca. It took 3 tries to find her, but he finally got the number through old contacts at the hospital. "Berenice, this is Theodore Mitchell. Do you remember me?" "Mr. Mitchell, wow, what a surprise. How did you get my number?" "I found your letter, the letter about my daughter." The silence on the other side of the line lasted so long that Theodore thought the call had dropped. "Berenice, I'm here. Mr. Mitchell, I hoped you would never find those papers. But I did. And I need to know the truth, the whole truth. The truth is painful, Mr. Mitchell. Your wife never knew that her daughter was born alive because she was in a coma at the time of the delivery. When she woke up, we told her that she had lost the baby because she was so fragile that we thought the news of the forced adoption would kill her." Forced adoption? Sister Catherine had contacts with orphanages. She sold babies to families who couldn't adopt legally. But in the case of your daughter, something went wrong. The family that was going to receive her backed out at the last minute, and the child ended up being sent to a regular orphanage. Theodore felt nauseous. "Which orphanage?" "St. Clair, in Springfield. Mr. Mitchell, I kept some documents from that time. If you want, I can send them to you." "I want them, and Berenice, thank you for keeping the truth all these years. I hope it can bring some peace to your life." When he finished the call, Theodore sat on the sofa and put his hands on his face. There was a real possibility that Carol was his daughter, and that meant that Emily was his granddaughter. But how to confirm without causing irreversible trauma to both of them? And what if he was wrong? What if it was just a cruel coincidence? During the following days, Theodore observed Carol with new eyes. He looked for physical similarities that he had previously attributed to chance. The way she twisted her hair when she was concentrated, exactly like Claire used to do. The way she raised an eyebrow when she was suspicious. The way she tilted her head when she heard something interesting. And Emily. The girl had not only the familiar birthmark, but also small gestures that reminded him of his family. The way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking. The habit of counting on her fingers when she tried to solve some simple problem. "Uncle Theodore, are you okay?" asked Emily one morning, noticing that he was observing her more intensely than usual. "I'm great, sweetie. I was just thinking about how fast you're growing up." "Mum Carol said that I'll start school soon." Theodore's heart tightened. Had Carol managed to save enough money to enroll Emily? Or was she just feeding the girl's hopes? "And are you excited?" "Very. I want to learn to read all the books in your house." Theodore smiled, but internally made a decision. Regardless of whether or not Carol was his daughter, he wouldn't allow that bright child to miss opportunities for lack of resources. It was time to make a proposal that would change everything, even if it meant revealing secrets that he had promised himself to keep hidden until he was absolutely sure of the truth. What he didn't know was that Carol was also keeping secrets, and that the revelation she planned to make would trigger a series of events that would bring to light even more surprising truths about the connection between their lives. Theodore's proposal came on a Friday morning when Carol was finishing organizing the library. He had spent the whole week rehearsing the words, trying to find a way to help without sounding condescending or suspicious. "Carol, I need to talk to you about something important." She stopped immediately, the cleaning cloth still in her hands. Serious conversations never meant good things in her life experience. "If it's about my work, I can improve what's not good." "It's not about your work, it's about Emily." Carol's heart raced. "What about Emily?" "She's an exceptionally intelligent child. She needs to be in school, receiving the education she deserves." "I know that," Carol said defensively. "I'm saving money to enroll her. I would like to pay for her studies." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Carol stared at him as if he had suggested something absurd or dangerous. "Why?" "Because every child deserves opportunities, and because I can afford to help." "And what do you want in return?" The question hurt Theodore more than he expected. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." "Everyone wants something," Carol said, her voice laden with bitterness. "I learned that the hard way." Theodore approached slowly, as if he were dealing with a wounded animal. "Carol, not all people have ulterior motives. Some genuinely want to help. Why her? Why Emily specifically? There are hundreds of needy children in this town." It was the question Theodore feared, because the true answer involved suspicions that he couldn't share yet. "Because I met her first. Because I saw her potential. And because what? Because you two gave me back something that I thought I had lost forever." "What thing?" "The feeling of having a family." Carol took a step back, as if the words had physical weight. "We're not your family. We're your employees. To me, you're much more than that." "Stop." Carol's voice came out louder than she intended, making Emily look from the window where she was playing in the yard. "Stop talking like that. You haven't known us for even 2 months. 2 months can be enough to recognize special people, or to be deluded about them." Theodore sighed. "Accept my help, Carol. Not for me, but for Emily. And when you get tired of us, when you decide to move again or find a real family, what happens to Emily when she's already used to this life that you're offering?" The question revealed the core of Carol's fears, and Theodore understood that she was protecting not only Emily, but herself. "I won't abandon you. Everyone says that, until they abandon you." "Who abandoned you, Carol?" The direct question caught her off guard. For a moment, her mask of strength wavered, revealing the pain she had carried for years. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I won't allow Emily to go through what I went through." "And what did you go through?" Carol looked at Emily, who had returned her attention to the butterflies in the garden, and made a decision. Maybe it was time for Theodore to understand why she was so distrustful. "When I was 15, a wealthy family decided to adopt me. Not officially, but they took me out of the orphanage, promising education, a better life. For 2 years, I lived as their daughter. I learned to behave at elegant dinners, to speak properly, to dream of a different future." Theodore listened in silence, sensing that the story wouldn't end well. Then their son came back from college and decided that I would be his personal amusement. When I refused his advances and told his parents, they accused me of seduction and lying. I was expelled back to the streets at 17 years old, with nothing but the clothes on my back. The revelation hit Theodore like a punch in the stomach. "Carol, I'm so sorry. I went hungry, slept in shelters, worked in anything I could until I managed to establish myself. And I swore that I would never accept charity from rich people again, because it always comes with a hidden price." "Not always. Always," she said firmly. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but always." "And if I prove that you're wrong?" "How?" Theodore hesitated. He was about to reveal something that would change everything, but perhaps it was the only way to gain Carol's trust. "Because maybe our connection is deeper than you imagine." "What kind of connection?" "Carol, I have reason to believe that you may be my daughter." The words fell like a bomb in the environment. Carol stared at him as if he had gone crazy. "That's ridiculous. You were born in 1988. You were left at the St. Clair orphanage when you were a baby. Sister Catherine was involved in your case." Carol paled. "How do you know these things?" "Because my wife had a daughter in 1988. They said the baby had died, but I recently discovered that she was given up for illegal adoption to the St. Clair orphanage." "That's coincidence. Emily has a birthmark in the shape of a star. My family has carried that mark for generations." Carol sat heavily in the nearest chair, the information being too much to process standing. "You're saying that—" "I'm saying that there's a real possibility that you're my daughter and Emily is my granddaughter." "No." Carol shook her head vigorously. "No, that can't be true." "Why not?" "Because it would be too cruel. Spending my whole life without family, taking care of a child alone, struggling to survive, and finding out that all along there was someone who—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the emotions being too strong. "Carol, if it's true, we can be a family, a real family. And if it's not, and if you're wrong, are you going to disappear from our lives when you find out that we're just two strangers that you decided to help out of pity?" "I would never do that." "How can I be sure?" "Because even if we're not family by blood, we're already family by choice. In the last 2 months, you two have become the most important people in my life." At that moment, Emily ran into the room, completely oblivious to the tension in the environment. "Aunt Carol, Uncle Theodore, there's a kitten in the yard. Can I give it some food?" Carol quickly wiped away the tears she had begun to shed and forced a smile. "Of course, honey. Get some milk from the kitchen." When Emily left, Carol turned to Theodore. "I need time to process all this." "Of course. But Carol, regardless of the truth about our possible family connection, my offer to help with Emily's education remains. No conditions, no expectations. Why would you do that?" "Because she deserves it. And because you also deserve to have the peace of mind, knowing that the girl you love will have every possible opportunity." Carol was silent for a long time, looking out the window where Emily was trying to convince the kitten to approach her. "If I accept," she said finally, "it will be under one condition." "What?" "You don't say anything to Emily about this possibility of us being family until we're absolutely sure. She's already lost too much in life." "I won't feed hopes that can be destroyed." "I agree. And if someday you decide that you're tired of us, let me know in advance, so that I can prepare Emily for another loss." The request broke Theodore's heart. That will never happen. Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. Carol studied him for a long moment, looking for signs of falsehood or manipulation. All she saw was sincerity and something that looked a lot like paternal love. "All right," she said finally. "I accept your help, but we're going to do it gradually and with clear rules. The rules you want." What neither of them knew was that, in the yard, Emily had overheard part of the conversation through the open window, and their words about family and abandonment had planted seeds of worry in her young mind that would soon grow and turn into fears that would test all the bonds that were being formed. The documents arrived a week later, sent by Berenice in a thick envelope that Theodore received with trembling hands. Throughout the week, he had observed Carol and Emily with a new intensity, looking for signs that confirmed or denied his growing suspicions. Alone in his office, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside were birth certificates, hospital records, and a series of documents that painted a devastating picture of corruption and institutional negligence. The first document confirmed his worst fears and his greatest hopes simultaneously. It was the original birth certificate of his daughter, dated March 15, 1988, exactly the date that Carol had mentioned as being her birthday. The name registered was Baby Mitchell, with a subsequent note indicating transfer to special care. The second document was even more revealing. A detailed medical report on the baby's health after birth, confirming that the child was healthy, but had been separated from the mother due to Claire's critical condition. The signature at the end of the document was Sister Catherine's. Theodore needed to stop reading several times, the emotion being overwhelming. His daughter was alive. She had been alive all this time, only a few hours away, growing up in an orphanage while he and Claire mourned a loss that had never happened. But the most shocking document was at the end of the envelope, a handwritten letter from Sister Catherine herself, dated 2 years ago, addressed "To whom it may concern. I am writing this letter on my sickbed, knowing that my days are numbered. During my career, I committed acts for which I carry guilt to this day. One of the most serious was the separation of a healthy baby from her biological parents, an action I carried out under pressure from corrupt superiors at the hospital. The child was born to Claire Mitchell on March 15, 1988. Her husband, Theodore Mitchell, was informed that the baby had passed away, but this was a lie. The girl was transferred to the St. Clair Orphanage in Springfield, where she grew up without knowledge of her true origin. I registered the child's name as Carol Adams, using the standard surname of the orphanage. If this letter ever reaches the hands of someone who can reunite this family, I ask forgiveness for decades of unnecessary suffering." Theodore dropped the letter, his hands shaking violently. It was no longer suspicion, it was absolute confirmation. Carol was his daughter. Emily was his granddaughter. His entire life had been a lie built on the cruelty of people who trafficked in hope and destroyed families. At that very moment, on the other side of Willow Creek, Carol was facing her own crisis. Emily had woken up during the night with nightmares, talking about people leaving and leaving her alone. It was evident that the little girl had overheard fragments of the conversation about family and abandonment, and now her little insecurities were manifesting. "Aunt Carol, is Uncle Theodore going to leave us?" Emily asked for the 4th time that morning as they got ready to go to the Blue House. "Why are you asking that, sweetie?" "Because I heard you talking about people leaving." Carol knelt in front of Emily, gently holding her small arms. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. I will never leave you. Never. No matter what happens. What about Uncle Theodore?" "Uncle Theodore. He likes us a lot. But if one day he needs to leave, we'll both be okay. We always are okay, aren't we?" Emily nodded, but her eyes still showed concern. "Can I ask him if he's going to stay?" "Yes, you can." When they arrived at Theodore's house, he was clearly different. His clothes were rumpled, as if he hadn't slept, and there were papers scattered on the table in a disorganized way. Something completely out of character for him. "Good morning," Carol said, immediately noticing his altered state. "Carol, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Emily, go play in the yard while I talk to Uncle Theodore, okay?" But before leaving, Emily approached Theodore with her childish determination. "Uncle Theodore, are you going to leave and abandon us?" The question hit Theodore like an arrow straight to the heart, especially considering what he had just discovered. He knelt down to her level. "Honey, why do you think I would leave?" "Because everyone always leaves." Theodore looked at Carol, seeing in her eyes the reflection of the same pain that Emily carried. "Emily, I want you to listen to something very important. I'm not going anywhere. You two have become my family, and family doesn't abandon family. Promise?" "I promise with all my heart." Emily smiled and ran to the yard, temporarily reassured. Carol watched the interaction with conflicting emotions, gratitude for Theodore's kindness, but also fear that promises would be broken. "Carol, I've confirmed everything," Theodore said as soon as they were alone. "I received the documents." "What documents?" Theodore took the papers from the table and handed them to her. "Carol, you are my daughter." The words echoed in the room like thunder. Carol took the documents with trembling hands, reading each line with growing disbelief. "This can't be real." "It's real. Your original birth certificate, medical reports, a letter of confession from Sister Catherine." Carol read the letter 3 times, each word hammering into her mind the enormity of the situation. She confessed everything." "Carol, my daughter." "No." Carol stepped back sharply. "Don't call me that yet." "Why?" "Because it's too much. It's too much to process." Tears began to stream down her face. "My whole life has been a lie. I grew up thinking I had been abandoned, that I wasn't worthy of love, that—" She couldn't finish, sobbing violently. Theodore approached slowly, as he would with an injured animal. "You have always been worthy of love. Always. And I spent 25 years mourning a daughter I thought I had lost, not knowing that you were growing up alone, struggling. Why did they do this? I don't know. Power, money, cruelty. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we found each other." Carol looked out the window, where Emily was playing happily, oblivious to the fact that her life had just changed forever. "What about Emily? How are we going to explain it to her?" "Carefully, with love, in her time. She'll be confused. She'll ask why, if you're my father, it took you so long to find me. And we'll explain that sometimes bad people do bad things, but love always finds a way." Carol sat down heavily on the chair, still processing the information. "If you're my father, that means Emily is your real granddaughter." "Yes, and that means she's entitled to everything I can offer. Education, opportunities, stability. And me? You're entitled to a family you should have had since birth. You're entitled to feel safe, loved, protected." "I don't know how to be someone's daughter," Carol said, her voice tiny. "I've never had a father. And I don't know how to be the father of an adult daughter," Theodore admitted. "But we can learn together." At that moment, Emily came running in, interrupting the intimate moment. "Mommy, Carol, why are you crying?" Carol quickly wiped away her tears. "They're happy tears, sweetie." "Why?" Carol looked at Theodore, who nodded encouragingly. "Because we discovered something very special about our family." "What?" "Uncle Theodore, he's my daddy." Emily was silent for a moment, processing the information with the seriousness that only small children can demonstrate. "Does that mean he's my grandpa?" "Yes, it does." Emily ran to Theodore and threw herself into his arms. "Now I have a real family." Theodore hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face, all the decades of loneliness, all the nights crying for a daughter he thought he had lost, all the pain of never having been a grandfather. Everything was being healed at that moment. But as the three hugged, none of them knew that there were even more secrets buried in the past, secrets about Emily's origin that would bring even more surprising revelations and complicate this newly discovered family reunion in unimaginable ways. The weeks that followed the revelation were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. Theodore insisted that Carol and Emily move into his house, offering the back room that had been intended as an office. Initially, Carol resisted, still struggling against the feeling that all this was too good to be true. "I can't accept," she said for the fifth time, as Theodore showed her the room he had prepared especially for them. "It's already too much that you're paying for Emily's school. Carol, you are my daughter. This is your home as much as mine. I know the documents prove it, but I can't stop feeling like I'm taking advantage of the situation." Theodore sighed, understanding that 25 years of abandonment wouldn't be healed overnight. "What can I do to make you feel more comfortable? Let me keep working, not as a maid, but contributing somehow, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the house. If that makes you feel better, okay." The change happened gradually. First, Carol and Emily started having lunch at the house. Then they stayed for dinner a few times. Finally, on a night when it rained heavily and the roof of her old house leaked, Theodore convinced them to sleep in the guest rooms, just for one night. That night turned into a week, then a month. Slowly, the blue house turned into a real home. Emily adapted with the natural ease of children. She called Theodore Grandpa with growing naturalness, especially after he installed a swing in the yard and started pushing her every afternoon. For her, having a bigger family was simply a blessing without complications. For Carol, the process was more complex. There were moments of pure happiness when Theodore told stories about Claire or taught recipes he had learned over the years. But there were also moments of panic when she woke up in the middle of the night thinking it was all just a dream. It was during one of these nightly crises that the first big problem happened. Carol was in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, drinking tea and trying to calm her thoughts, when she found some documents that Theodore had left scattered on the table. Among them was a folder with the name Investigation Emily Adams on the cover. Carol's heart froze. With trembling hands, she opened the folder and found a series of papers that Theodore had compiled about Emily's origin. There were copies of records from the church where the girl was abandoned, information about the young woman who left her there, and a detailed investigation into the family of the nun responsible for the case. What shocked her most was a photograph attached to the documents, an image of a young woman of approximately 16, clearly pregnant, entering the church on the day Emily was abandoned. On the back of the photo, a note: Sofia Rodriguez, 16 years old, granddaughter of Sister Esperanza. Carol felt nauseous as she read the nun's name. Sister Esperanza had been mentioned in Sister Catherine's documents as an accomplice in the illegal adoptions. The connection was impossible to ignore. "Carol, what are you doing up?" She turned abruptly, finding Theodore in pajamas at the entrance to the kitchen. In her hands, the documents about Emily were clearly visible. "What is this?" she asked, her voice laced with accusation. Theodore immediately realized what had happened. "I can explain. You were investigating Emily behind our backs?" "It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Carol stood up, the documents still in her hands. "You discovered I was your daughter and decided to investigate where my adopted daughter came from." "Carol, please calm down." "Calm down?" Her voice rose in tone. "You violated our privacy. You're investigating a 4-year-old child as if she were a criminal. I just wanted to understand." "Understand what? If she's worthy of being part of your family? If she has the proper pedigree?" "That's not it." "Then what is it?" Theodore sat down heavily on the chair, running his hands over his face. "When I found out you were my daughter, I realized that Emily was also connected to this whole network of illegal adoptions. I wanted to understand if she was also a victim of the same scheme. And what did you find out?" I found out that the young woman who abandoned Emily was the granddaughter of Sister Esperanza, who worked with Sister Catherine in the family separation scheme. Carol felt like the floor was disappearing beneath her feet. What are you saying? I'm saying there's a possibility that Emily also has living biological family who may not know she exists. No! Carol shook her head vigorously. No, you can't do that. Do what? Take Emily away from me too. Carol, no one is going to take Emily away from you. Yes, you will. If she has biological family, if she has real parents somewhere, you're going to want to reunite her with them too. And I'm going to lose the only good thing I've ever had in my life. Tears of despair streamed down Carol's face as she clutched the documents against her chest, as if that could protect Emily from being taken away. Carol, you are Emily's mother. Documents don't change that. I'm not her mother biologically. If the real family shows up— Who abandoned her when she was a baby? Theodore interrupted. Carol, even if we find these people, that doesn't mean they have more right over Emily than you. At that moment, a sleepy little voice echoed from the entrance to the kitchen. Mommy Carol, why are you crying? Emily was at the door, wearing her pink pajamas and holding the teddy bear that Theodore had bought for her. Her big eyes were full of concern. Carol quickly hid the documents and wiped away her tears. It's nothing, sweetie. Go back to bed. Are you sad? No, I'm fine. But Emily, with the keen perception of children, didn't believe her. She approached and climbed onto Carol's lap. Grandpa, why is Mommy Carol sad? Theodore looked at Carol, asking for silent permission to answer. She nodded hesitantly. Sometimes adults get worried about silly things, he said gently. But it's nothing you need to worry about. Is it about me? The direct question caught both adults off guard. Why do you think that? Carol asked. Because you always stop talking when I arrive, and because I heard Grandpa talking about finding people. Carol and Theodore exchanged glances, realizing that they could no longer protect Emily from the truth, at least not completely. Emily, Carol said carefully, do you remember when I told you that I found you at the church when you were a baby? I remember. Grandpa was trying to understand more about that. To make sure you're safe with us. Does someone want to take me away? No, Carol and Theodore said simultaneously. No one is going to take you from us, Carol continued. You're my daughter, no matter what happens. And you're my granddaughter, Theodore added. Our family. Emily seemed satisfied with the explanation and went back to bed. But when they were alone again, the tension returned. Theodore, I need you to promise me something, Carol said. What? If you find out anything about Emily's biological family, you tell me first, before making any decisions. I promise. And if they want her back, we'll fight together, Theodore said firmly. Emily is our daughter now. We are her real family. But while Carol finally managed to go back to bed, neither of them knew that Theodore's investigations had already attracted unwanted attention. Sofia Rodriguez, now 20 years old and living in Springfield, had been contacted by a private detective about matters related to a child abandoned 4 years ago. And Sofia, who had spent the last 4 years regretting her decision to abandon her daughter, had just decided it was time to find out what had happened to the baby she left at the church that rainy night. The family reunion that had brought so much joy to Theodore, Carol, and Emily was about to face its biggest test, a battle that would question the very meaning of family and force everyone to discover how far they were willing to go to protect the love they had built together. The call came on a rainy Tuesday, 3 weeks after the discovery of the documents. Theodore was in the backyard, pushing Emily on the swing, when the phone rang. Carol, who was folding clothes on the porch, answered without imagining that this call would change everything again. Hello? Good afternoon. I would like to speak with Mr. Theodore Mitchell. Mitchell? He's busy at the moment. Can I help you? My name is Sofia Rodriguez. I believe he's investigating information about a child who was— who was left at First Presbyterian Church 4 years ago. Carol's blood ran cold. She looked instinctively at Emily, who was laughing as Theodore pushed her on the swing, completely oblivious to the approaching storm. "One moment, please." Carol walked to the yard with trembling steps. "Theodore, you have a call. Someone named Sofia Rodriguez." Theodore's face paled. He stopped the swing and headed inside the house, leaving Emily playing alone. "Hello? Mr. Mitchell? My name is Sofia Rodriguez. A detective contacted me saying that you were investigating information about a child abandoned at First Presbyterian Church in 2019. That's right. That child. Is she okay? Where is she now?" Theodore looked at Carol, who was watching him with an expression of barely contained panic. "Why are you asking?" "Because I am. I was very young at the time, only 16. My grandmother forced me to leave the baby there. She said I was too young to raise a child. And now I'm 20 years old. I finished junior high, I'm working, and I don't go a day without thinking about her. It's a girl, isn't it?" Theodore hesitated. "How do you know?" "Because I held her for 3 days before being forced to abandon her. I called her Isabella, but I know they probably changed her name. Sophia, I understand your situation, but I need you to understand something important. This child has a family now, a family that loves and cares for her. I just want to know if she's okay, if she's happy, if—" Sophia's voice broke, and Theodore could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "She is very well," he said gently. "She's a happy, smart, loved child. Can I see her? Just once? Just to make sure she's okay?" Carol, who could hear fragments of the conversation, shook her head vigorously. Theodore saw the terror in her eyes and understood that any decision he made would have devastating consequences. "Sophia, this is a very delicate situation. I need to talk to the family who cares for her. Please, Mr. Mitchell, I've spent 4 years regretting the worst decision of my life. I just want to know that my daughter is okay. I'll talk to them and get back to you." After hanging up, the silence in the house was deafening. Carol stared at him with a mixture of fear and accusation. "Are you going to let her see Emily?" "I don't know yet." "How do you not know? She abandoned Emily when she was a baby. She has no right to her now." "Carol, she was 16 years old. She was a minor. She may have been forced to make that decision." "So what? I was also young when I took on the responsibility of caring for Emily. No one forced me, no one helped me. You're right, but nothing!" Carol was almost shouting now. "Do you want to hand Emily over to a stranger just because she came from her womb?" At that moment, Emily ran into the house, attracted by the shouting. "Why are you fighting?" Carol immediately controlled herself, kneeling in front of the girl. "We're not fighting, sweetie. We're just talking about grown-up stuff. You are talking loudly." "Sometimes adults talk loudly when they're worried," Theodore explained. "Are you worried about me?" "No." They both lied simultaneously. But Emily was no longer the innocent child of months ago. The stability she had found in that house had sharpened her perception, and she knew that something important was happening. "Does someone want to take me away?" The direct question made Carol and Theodore exchange nervous glances. "No one is going to take you from us," Carol said firmly. "Promise?" "I promise." After Emily returned to the yard, the discussion resumed, but in lower tones. "Theodore, you can't do this to me. You can't do this to her." "Carol, maybe we should at least hear what Sophia has to say." "No, you don't understand what it's like to lose someone you love. Emily is all I have. You have me too. We are a family now. What if Sophia decides she wants Emily back? What if she sues for custody? She's the biological mother." "Biological mother who abandoned the child," Theodore reminded her. "That doesn't matter to the justice system. You know that." Theodore sighed, knowing that Carol was right. The legal system often favored biological ties over emotional ties. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell her you didn't find anything. That the child was adopted by a distant family and you have no further information. It would be a lie. It would be protection for Emily and for us. Carol, Theodore, please, you said you were my family, that you wouldn't abandon me. Prove it now. Carol's plea hit him deeply. He saw the terror in her eyes, the fear of losing once again the only thing that gave meaning to her life. Okay, he said finally, I'll discourage Sophia. But if she insists, if she seeks lawyers or private investigators, we'll deal with it when it happens. That night, Theodore called Sophia back. Sophia, I talked to the family, and they are not willing to allow a meeting. The child is well adjusted, and they fear that it will cause confusion. I understand, Sophia said, her voice filled with sadness. But Mr. Mitchell, can I ask you a favor? What? Can you tell her when she's older that her biological mother never wanted to abandon her, that she was forced to, and that she thinks about her every day? The question broke Theodore's heart. I'll consider it. Thank you, and sir, one more thing. If she ever wants to meet me, my number will always be the same. I'll be waiting. After hanging up, Theodore felt torn between relief and guilt. He had protected his family, but he had also denied a young mother the chance to meet the daughter she was forced to abandon. Carol, watching from the door, approached and held his hand. Thank you, she whispered. I hope we did the right thing. We did. Emily is our daughter now, our family. But as they hugged, neither of them noticed that Emily was at the bedroom window, listening to fragments of the conversation. Words like biological mother, abandon, and searching echoed in her young mind, planting seeds of confusion and curiosity that would grow in the following days. The next morning, Emily asked a question that caught Carol off guard. Mommy Carol, what is a biological mother? Carol almost dropped her coffee cup. Where did you hear that? On television, Emily lied. It's the woman who carries the baby in her belly. And are you my biological mother? Carol looked at Theodore, who was watching the conversation with growing concern. No, sweetie, I'm your heart mother. I chose you, and I love you as if you were born to me. And where is my biological mother? We don't know, Carol said, the lie weighing on her heart. Didn't she want me? Sometimes people can't take care of babies even if they want to. The important thing is that you have a family that loves you very much. Emily nodded, but her eyes showed that the questions would continue. And Carol knew that sooner or later she would have to tell the whole truth to the girl she considered her daughter. What none of them knew was that Sophia had not given up. The refusal had only strengthened her determination to find her daughter. And next week she would arrive in Willow Creek in person, determined to find out where the child she had been forced to abandon 4 years ago was. Sophia arrived in Willow Creek on a Saturday morning, driving a small car borrowed from a friend. At 20 years old, she carried on her shoulders a maturity forced by circumstances, but her eyes still revealed the vulnerability of someone who grew up too fast. She parked in front of First Presbyterian Church, the place where she had left her daughter 4 years ago. For long minutes, she remained seated in the car, reliving that terrible night when her grandmother, Sister Esperanza, forced her to abandon the baby she had carried for 9 months. If you don't leave that child here, I'll kick you out of the house, the nun had said coldly. You're 16 years old. There's no way you can raise a child. And I'm not going to support another mouth. Sophia remembered how she held the baby one last time, whispering promises that one day she would come back for her, promises that she now wanted to fulfill. She got out of the car and walked to the central square, where she planned to begin her discreet search. She didn't want to alert Theodore to her presence until she had more information. It was at the local bakery that she heard the first clue. A 4-year-old girl with a star-shaped birthmark, repeated Mrs. Gable, the baker, when Sophia vaguely described her daughter. That must be Emily. Sophia's heart leaped. Emily? Yes, Carol's daughter. They now live with Mr. Mitchell in the Blue House. A beautiful family, very close-knit. Sophia felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Not only did her daughter have a different name, but she was living with the very person who had tried to keep her away. Are they married, Carol and Theodore? No, not that I know of. She's his daughter, apparently. It was a surprise to everyone when they found out. And little Emily is his granddaughter. The information collided in Sophia's mind like pieces of an impossible puzzle. Theodore had lied to her. Not only had he found her daughter, but she was living with his own family. Sophia spent the rest of the morning discreetly watching the blue house on Palm Street. Around noon, she saw a grey-haired man leave with a small brown-haired girl. Her heart stopped when she recognized the child's face. It was her daughter. Taller, smarter, clearly well cared for, but undoubtedly the baby she had left at the church. Emily, a name that Sophia whispered several times, experimenting with how it sounded, played happily as she walked hand in hand with Theodore. They headed to the square, where the man bought ice cream for the girl. Sophia followed them at a safe distance, watching every gesture, every smile of her daughter. The girl seemed happy, safe, loved. Part of her felt relieved. Another part felt a piercing pain for everything she had missed. It was when Carol appeared in the square that Sophia understood the full complexity of the situation. The woman was young, only a few years older than her, and clearly devoted to the girl. When Emily ran into her arms shouting, "Mommy!" Sophia felt like a knife was going through her chest. This woman had lived all the moments that should have been hers. The first steps, the first words, the first day of school that was to come. That afternoon, Sophia made a desperate decision. She waited until Carol went out alone to shop and approached her at the grocery store. "Excuse me, are you Carol?" Carol turned around, surprised to be approached by an unknown young woman. "Yes, why? My name is Sophia Rodriguez. I need to talk to you about Emily." Carol's face paled instantly. "Who are you?" "I'm her biological mother." The words fell like bombs in the environment. Carol dropped her shopping basket, fruits rolling across the floor of the market. "That can't be—" "I can prove it. She has a star-shaped birthmark on her right arm, a small birthmark on her neck, and a dimple in her chin when she smiles." Each confirmed detail made Carol feel weaker. "What do you want?" "I want to meet my daughter." "She's not your daughter," Carol said, finding strength in anger. "You abandoned her when she was a baby." "I was forced. I was 16 years old. My grandmother forced me." "And now you've decided you want her back?" "No, yes. I don't know," Sophia admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I just know that I've been thinking about her every day for 4 years. That I regret not fighting harder to stay with her." "Well, you should have thought about that before." "Carol, please. I don't want to take her away from you. I know you're a good mother, I can see that. But she's my daughter too." "No, she's not. Being a mother isn't about giving birth. It's about caring, protecting, loving unconditionally. It's about being present when the child is sick, scared, needing comfort." "You're right," Sophia said quietly. "But that doesn't change the fact that she came from me, that I carried her for 9 months, dreaming of the future we would have together." Carol looked at that young woman and saw in her something that frightened her: sincerity. Sophia didn't seem to be lying or manipulating. She seemed genuinely regretful and in love with the daughter she had lost. "What exactly do you want?" "To meet her, to spend some time with her. Maybe be part of her life in some way. Like an aunt. Like whatever you allow." Carol was silent for a long moment. "Does Theodore know you're here?" "He lied to me. He said you wouldn't let me see her." "Because I asked him to do that." "Why?" "Because I'm afraid of losing her. Emily is all I have." "You have Theodore too. He's your father, isn't he?" "Yes, but—" "It's complicated. Our family is complicated." Sophia nodded. "Mine was too. My grandmother was a nun, but she was anything but holy. She did things, bad things, with children and families." "What kind of things?" "She separated families. She sold babies. She lied to desperate parents. Sophia hesitated. In fact, I think she was involved in your case too. Theodore mentioned a sister Catherine, and I know my grandmother worked with her. The revelation hit Carol like a slap. Your grandmother participated in the separation between me and my father? It's possible, and she also forced the separation between me and Emily. So we're all victims of the same person. We are. The two women looked at each other, recognizing a shared pain that created an unexpected connection between them. Sophia, Carol said finally, I need to talk to Theodore before making any decisions about Emily. I understand. Where are you staying? At the inn around the corner. I'll talk to him tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. Sophia nodded and walked away, leaving Carol alone with her groceries scattered on the floor and a storm of emotions in her heart. That night, after Emily was asleep, Carol told Theodore everything. His reaction was one of frustration and worry. She shouldn't be here. But she is. And Theodore, she doesn't seem like a bad person. She just seems lost. Carol, do you realize what this means? If she decides to fight for custody, she said she doesn't want to take Emily away from me. For now. But what if she changes her mind? I don't know, but I also can't pretend she doesn't exist. Emily will grow up. She'll ask questions about her origin. I can't lie to her forever. Theodore sighed. What do you want to do? I want to get to know her better, understand her real intentions, and maybe let her meet Emily. Carol, that's dangerous. Everything in life is dangerous, but hiding the truth also has its risks. The next morning, Carol called Sophia and they arranged to meet at Tony's diner. What neither of them expected was that Emily, playing nearby with Theodore, would overhear fragments of the conversation that would change her understanding of herself forever. The meeting between the two mothers was about to reveal truths that would shake the foundations of the fragile stability that the family had built, forcing everyone to redefine the meaning of love, family, and belonging. The meeting at Tony's diner happened on a Tuesday morning when there was less activity and they could talk with more privacy. Carol arrived first, choosing a table in the corner away from the windows. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred sugar into the coffee she didn't even feel like drinking. Sophia appeared punctually at 10 o'clock, wearing a simple but well-kept dress, her hair pulled back in a low bun. She looked younger than her 20 years, and there was a vulnerability in her eyes that Carol recognized. It was the same one she saw in the mirror when she thought about losing Emily. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Sophia said, sitting down carefully. "I need to understand your intentions before making any decisions." "My intentions," Sophia sighed. "Honestly, I don't know for sure. For 4 years, I dreamed of the day I could look for my daughter. But now that I'm here, seeing how happy she is with you—" "She is happy," Carol confirmed. "Very happy. I can see that. Yesterday, when I watched her in the square, she laughed in a way that made me realize that you gave her something that I could never have given at 16. What thing? Stability, security, a real family." Carol studied Sophia's face, looking for signs of manipulation or falsehood. All she found was genuine pain and deep regret. "Tell me about that night when you left her at the church." Sophia closed her eyes, as if reliving the memory was physically painful. "My grandmother found out I was pregnant when I was 7 months along. Until then, I had managed to hide it. She was furious, said I was a shame to the family." "What about the baby's father?" "He was a boy from school. When he found out about the pregnancy, he disappeared. The family moved out of town without notice. You were alone. Completely. My grandmother locked me in the house during the last months. She said that when the baby was born, it would be given to a suitable family through her contacts in the church." Carol felt a pang in her heart, imagining a pregnant teenager going through all this alone. "But when Emily was born, when she was born, everything changed for me. I held her in my arms and knew that I could never hand her over to strangers. I fought with my grandmother for 3 days, begged, promised that I could work and support us both. And she didn't give in. No. On the third day, she told me that if I didn't take the baby to the church that night, she would do it herself the next morning, and then she would kick me out of the house. Sophia paused, wiping away the tears that had begun to flow. I preferred to take her personally. At least that way I could choose a place that seemed sacred, where she would be found quickly. Did you see her being found? I stayed hidden across the street until I was sure someone would show up. When I saw you leave the church with her in your arms. You saw me? I did. You looked so young, but there was something on your face. A determination, a tenderness. At that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Carol felt a chill. During all these years, she had never imagined that Emily's biological mother had witnessed that moment. Why did it take 4 years to look for her? Because I needed to become someone worthy of being her mother. I finished junior high, got a job, moved out of my grandmother's house. I wanted to have something to offer before trying to find her. And now I work as a secretary in Springfield. I have a small but own apartment and I wake up every day thinking about her. Carol was silent, processing everything she had heard. Sophia, do you understand that Emily calls me Mom? That she doesn't know anything about you? I understand. And I don't want to confuse her. I would just like to be part of her life in some way, even if it's as a friend of the family. What if one day she wants to know the truth? If she asks why you left her? I'll tell her the truth. That I was too young, that I couldn't afford it, but that I never stopped loving her. At that moment, a familiar, childish voice echoed from across the square. "Mommy Carol! Mommy Carol!" The two women turned and saw Emily running towards the diner, followed by Theodore, who was trying to catch up with her. "She shouldn't be here," Carol muttered, panicking. "Mommy, I looked everywhere for you," Emily said, arriving breathlessly at the table. "Grandpa said you were having coffee with a friend." It was then that Emily noticed Sophia, studying her face with the natural curiosity of children. "Hi," she said shyly. Sophia couldn't speak. Being so close to her daughter, hearing her voice, seeing her gestures up close, it was overwhelming. Silent tears streamed down her face. "Why's the lady crying?" Emily asked Carol. "Sometimes adults cry when they're emotional," Carol explained. Theodore finally arrived at the table, visibly tense to see Sophia there. "Emily, let's let your mother finish her coffee." "No, Grandpa, I want to stay here." To the horror of Carol and Theodore, Emily approached Sophia. "You're pretty," she said with the honesty of children. "Why are you sad?" Sophia tried to control herself, but being face to face with the daughter she had lost was too much for her. "I'm okay, little one," she managed to say. "What's your name?" "Sophia." "I'm Emily. I'm 4 years old." "I know, you're a very special girl." "How do you know?" Sophia looked desperately at Carol, who was white with tension. "Because I can see it in your eyes," Sophia finally said. Emily smiled, clearly satisfied with the answer. "Do you want to see my drawing? I drew a bird yesterday." "Emily, don't bother the lady," Carol said quickly. "I'd love to see your drawing," Sophia said, ignoring Carol's warning look. Emily ran to Theodore and took a sheet of paper from his bag. The drawing showed a colourful bird, with lines surprisingly elaborate for a 4-year-old. "It's beautiful," Sophia said, her voice choked. "You have a lot of talent." "Grandpa is teaching me to draw better. He said I'll be starting school soon." "That's wonderful." At that moment, Emily did something that caught everyone off guard. She approached Sophia and hugged her. "Don't be sad," she said. "Hugs make people feel better." Sophia returned the hug, closing her eyes and recording in her memory the smell, the warmth, the feeling of having her daughter in her arms again. When Emily pulled away, Sophia was sobbing silently. "Carol, we need to go," Theodore said, realizing that the situation was getting too intense. "But I want to stay with Sophia," Emily protested. "She's nice." Another day you can talk to her again, Carol said, taking the girl's hand. Promise? Carol looked at Sophia, who stared at her with pleading in her eyes. I promise, she said finally. After Theodore and Emily walked away, Sophia remained seated, still processing the meeting. She's perfect, she murmured. She is, Carol agreed, and she's also very perceptive. Soon she'll start asking questions about you. What are we going to do? I don't know yet, but Sophia, that hug she gave you. Emily only does that with people she trusts instinctively. What does that mean? It means that maybe she feels some connection with you that she doesn't even understand. Do you think that's possible? I think a mother's love leaves marks that even time can't completely erase. That night, Emily asked a question that left Carol and Theodore panicking. Mommy, why did I feel so good near Sophia? It was like I already knew her. Carol looked at Theodore, knowing that the time had come to start telling truths that she had hoped to avoid forever. Sophia's presence had accelerated an inevitable process, and now they would have to navigate the dangerous waters of revealing to a 4-year-old that her life was much more complicated than she imagined. What none of them knew was that this gradual revelation would awaken in Emily a curiosity about her origins that would force them to confront even more painful truths about the past. Truths that would test all the bonds they had built and force them to redefine once again what it really meant to be a family. The conversation that would change everything happened 3 days after the meeting at the diner. Emily had spent those days asking constant questions about Sophia, demonstrating a curiosity that went beyond the normal interest of a child for a new person. Mommy, when is Sophia coming to visit us? She asked for the 10th time that morning. I don't know, sweetie, but you promised I could talk to her again. I did promise, but so when? Carol looked at Theodore, who was trying to concentrate on the newspaper, but clearly listening to every word of the conversation. They had postponed this discussion for days, but Emily's insistence made it impossible to continue avoiding the subject. Emily, come here. I need to talk to you about something important. The girl approached with that seriousness that children demonstrate when they feel that something significant is about to happen. Remember when I told you that I found you at the church when you were a baby? I remember. And you know that I'm not your biological mother, right? Emily nodded, although Carol could see confusion in her eyes. Biological mother is who has the baby in her belly, she recited, repeating the explanation she had received before. That's right. And Emily, Sophia is your biological mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked at Carol, then at Theodore, trying to process the information. She had me in her belly. She did. Then why did she leave me at the church? The question that Carol most feared had arrived. How to explain to a 4-year-old the complexities of teenage pregnancy, family pressure, and impossible circumstances? Because she was very young, almost a child like you, and her family said she couldn't take care of you. Didn't she want to take care of me? She wanted to very much, but she couldn't fight against the people who controlled her. Emily was quiet for a long time, wiggling her own fingers as she did when she was thinking deeply. And now she's grown up, become an adult, and wants to meet you. Does she want to take me away? The question hit Carol like a stab wound. No, sweetie, she knows you're my daughter now. She just wants to be your friend, like an aunt. It could be. So can I have 2 mothers? You can have as many people who love you as you want. Emily smiled, and Carol felt temporary relief. But she knew that more questions would come, and some would be much more difficult to answer. Can I call her to come here? I can talk to her, Carol said carefully. That afternoon, Carol called Sophia. Emily knows about me? I told her that you're her biological mother. How did she react? Better than I expected. She wants to see you. Really? Sophia's voice filled with hope. But we have to establish clear rules. This can't confuse her. What kind of rules? You can't promise things you can't fulfill. You can't talk about taking her to live with you. And if she asks questions about the past, we have to answer them together. I agree with everything. And Sophia, if you decide that this is too complicated and want to give up, let me know beforehand. Don't just disappear. I would never do that to her. I've already abandoned her once. The next day, Sophia came to dinner at the Blue House. Emily was waiting for her at the window, wearing her prettiest dress, excited about the visit. "She's here! She's here!" she shouted when she saw Sophia's car parking. Carol opened the door, and Sophia came in carrying a gift wrapped in colored paper. "Hi, Emily," she said nervously. "Hi, Sophia. Did you bring a present?" "I did. I hope you like it." Emily opened the package and found a set of professional colored pencils and a sketchbook. "That's beautiful. Thank you. Your mother said you like to draw." "I like it a lot. Do you want to see my drawings?" "Sure." For the next hour, Emily showed Sophia all her drawings, explaining each detail with the passion of an experienced artist. Sophia listened with total attention, asking questions and giving compliments that made Emily glow with pride. "You draw very well," Sophia said. "Where did you learn?" "Grandpa taught me, and Mommy helps me too. They are very special, aren't they?" "They are. I love them very much. And they love you very much too. I can see that." During dinner, Emily asked the question that everyone expected, but that still caught everyone off guard. "Sophia, why did you leave me at the church?" Sophia looked at Carol, who nodded encouragingly. "Because I was very young, Emily. I was only 16 years old, almost a child, and my family wouldn't let me stay with you." "Did you want to stay?" "I wanted to, very much. You were the most beautiful baby I've ever seen." "But didn't you fight?" The question hurt Sophia deeply, but she decided to be honest. "I didn't fight enough, and I regret it every day." "Were you scared?" "Very scared. Afraid of not being able to take care of you properly, afraid of not having money, afraid of disappointing my family." "And now?" "Now I'm still scared, but of different things. I'm afraid you won't like me, that I won't be important in your life." Emily thought for a moment, then stood up and hugged Sophia. "I like you, and you can be important if you want." Sophia started crying, and Emily got worried. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, little one. You said something very right. Sometimes people cry when they're very happy. So you're happy? Very happy." After dinner, while Emily played in the yard, the three adults talked about how to proceed. "She's handling this better than I expected," Carol admitted. "Kids are more resilient than we think," Theodore said. "What happens now?" Sophia asked. "Let's take it slow," Carol said. "You can visit her regularly, but no rush. Let her get used to the idea." "What if she wants to know more about my family?" "About the people who forced me to give her up." "We'll tell her the truth, adapted for her age," Theodore said. "But only when she's ready." "Theodore," Sophia said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you know what happened to my grandmother, Sister Esperanza? According to my information, she passed away 2 years ago. Why? Because before she died, she told me something about the scheme of separating families, something that might interest you." Carol and Theodore exchanged glances, sensing more revelations were coming. "What kind of thing?" Carol asked. "She said it wasn't just babies they were separating from families. Sometimes it was older children too. Children who had families, but who were taken from them through lies and false documents. And she specifically mentioned a child who was taken from a wealthy family when she was 2 years old. A girl who was placed in an orphanage under a false identity." Carol felt a chill in her stomach. "Which girl?" "She didn't say the name, but she described a specific birthmark. A mark that, according to her, the family searched for years." "What mark?" Theodore asked, his voice almost inaudible. "A star-shaped mark." The silence that followed was loaded with devastating implications. If Sophia was right, if Sister Esperanza had told the truth, then Carol might not have been abandoned as a baby. She might have been kidnapped from her real family. "Sophia," Theodore said slowly, "are you sure about what you're saying?" Yes, she was confessing all her sins before she died. She said this was the worst thing she had done, but that would mean that... Carol couldn't finish the sentence. It would mean that maybe you have another family somewhere. A family that never stopped looking for you. The revelation exploded like a bomb in the middle of the stability they had built. Just when they thought all the secrets had been revealed, they discovered that there may be even more truths buried in the past. Truths that could destroy or completely transform everything they believed they knew about themselves. From the backyard came the sound of Emily's laughter, oblivious to the fact that the family she had finally found was about to face yet another twist that would test all the bonds they had built. The investigation began the next day, but this time Theodore decided to hire a professional detective. Gabriel Souza specialized in missing persons cases and had experience with irregular adoption networks. His office in New York City was filled with files of families separated by decades of institutional corruption. Cases like this are more common than people imagine, Gabriel explained during the first meeting. In the 80s and 90s, there was an organized network that kidnapped children from families with resources and placed them in orphanages with false identities. But why would they do that? Carol asked, still trying to process the possibility that her whole life was based on an even bigger lie. Money. Wealthy families paid fortunes to get their children back. When they couldn't pay, the children remained in the system. It was a blackmail scheme disguised as charity. Theodore showed all the documents he had about Carol, including Sister Catherine's confessions and Sophia's recent information. Based on the date and circumstances, it's very likely that Carol was a victim of this scheme, Gabriel concluded. I'll start a search for families who reported the disappearance of a 2-year-old girl in 1990. What if we find this family? Carol asked, her voice trembling. Then you decide if you want to make contact. During the following weeks, while Gabriel conducted his investigation, life in the Blue House continued under controlled tension. Sophia started visiting Emily 3 times a week, and gradually a routine was established that worked for everyone. Emily had naturally adapted to Sophia's presence, referring to her as my other heart mother, with the simplicity that only children possess. She saw no contradiction in having 2 mothers. For her, more love just meant more security. Mum Carol, she said one afternoon, when I grow up, will I have 2 families? What do you mean, honey? Sophia's family and our family. You want to have 2 families? I want to have all the families that love me. Emily's childish wisdom often surprised the adults and made them reflect on their own emotional complications. It was during one of those visits from Sophia that Gabriel called with the first findings. I found something, he said, when Theodore answered the phone. I need you to come to my office and bring Carol. The trip to New York City was tense. Carol held Theodore and Sophia's hands, who had insisted on accompanying them, tightly enough to cut off circulation. Emily had stayed with Mrs. Gable from the flower shop, believing that the adults were going to deal with boring paperwork. In Gabriel's office, they found a thick file full of documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings on the table. In March 1990, Gabriel began, Carlos Eduardo Ribeiro and his wife Marina reported the disappearance of their 2-year-old daughter, Ana Beatriz Ribeiro. The girl was playing in the backyard of the family home in upstate New York when she simply disappeared. Carol felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Ana Beatriz. The child had a star-shaped birthmark on her right arm and very expressive brown eyes. The family offered a reward, hired detectives, launched media campaigns. They never stopped looking. Gabriel showed a faded photograph of a little girl with curly hair and a radiant smile. Carol looked at the image and saw her own face decades younger. My God, Sophia whispered, she's identical to you, Carol. And here, Gabriel continued, showing a newspaper clipping from 2015, an article about the 25th anniversary of the disappearance. The parents, now over 60, still hope to find their daughter. Are they still alive? Theodore asked. They are. Carlos Eduardo has retired, but Marina still works as a teacher. They never had other children. According to neighbors, they keep the girl's room exactly as it was in 1990. Carol began to cry silently. They spent 35 years looking for me? According to the records, yes. And there's more. Gabriel opened another file. In 2018, they received an anonymous call from someone who claimed to know where their daughter was. The person asked for $50,000 to reveal the information. When the parents managed to raise the money, the contact disappeared. Who made the call? I suspect it was Sister Esperanza. The dates coincide with the period when she was sick and needed money for treatment. She was trying to make money from their suffering, Sophia said, horrified. It's likely, but the call proves that Anna Beatrice, Carol, was alive and that someone knew where she was. Theodore looked at Carol, who was visibly in shock. What do you want to do? I don't know. It's a lot. Carol, Sophia said gently, you have a family that never stopped loving you, a family that never gave up on finding you. But I also have a family, Carol said, looking at Theodore. And Emily. How can I divide that? You don't have to divide it, Gabriel said. You can expand it. What if they reject me? What if they don't like the person I've become? Carol, Theodore said, according to the reports, these people have loved you for 35 years without even knowing if you were alive. They won't reject you now. But what about Emily? How do I explain to her that we now have even more family? The same way you explained about Sophia, Theodore said, with love and patience. Gabriel spoke up. I can make the first contact if you want. Explain the situation and prepare a controlled meeting. Carol was silent for a long time, processing decades of life that she had just discovered were based on lies. If I do this, she said finally, I want Sophia to come with me. Why? Sophia asked, surprised. Because you understand what it's like to lose family, and because Emily likes you. If this goes wrong, she'll need all the people who love her. Carol, Theodore said, this isn't going to go wrong. How can you be sure? Because true love always finds a way. That night, when they returned to Willow Creek, they found Emily sleeping at Mrs. Gable's house. The girl woke up when they arrived and ran to hug them. You took so long, I thought you'd forgotten me. I would never forget you, Carol said, hugging her tight. Did you solve the boring paperwork? We solved some things, Theodore said. What things? Carol looked at Sophia and Theodore, making a decision. Emily, remember when we found out that Uncle Theodore is my dad? I remember. And when we found out that Sophia is your other heart-mother? I remember. Well, it seems that our family may get even bigger. How? We found out that I may have other parents too. Parents who lost me when I was little and never stopped looking for me. Emily processed the information with the seriousness she always showed when something important was being discussed. So you're going to have 2 dads and 2 heart-mothers like me? It's possible. And will they like me too? If they exist, I'm sure they'll love you very much. Then our family's going to be huge. It may be. Is that good? It can be very good, Sophia said. Big families mean a lot of love. Then I want to meet them. The simplicity with which Emily accepted yet another twist in their lives reminded the adults that perhaps they were complicating something that could be simple. Love has no limit, and family isn't about blood or circumstances. It's about choice, care, and mutual commitment. But even with this comforting perspective, everyone knew that the meeting with Carlos Eduardo and Marina would be an emotional test, like no other they had faced. Decades of pain, hope, and lost dreams would be concentrated in a single moment, and no one could predict how this would affect the delicate harmony they had built together. The phone call to Gabriel was made the next morning. The most important family meeting of their lives was about to be scheduled. The first contact took place on a rainy Thursday. Gabriel called Carlos Eduardo Ribeiro at 9 in the morning, when he knew the retired man would be having coffee and reading the newspaper, as he had done for decades, hoping to find some news about his missing daughter. "Mr. Carlos Eduardo, my name is Gabriel Souza. I'm a private detective. I'm calling about Ana Beatriz." On the other end of the line, the silence was so long that Gabriel thought the call had dropped. "Ana Beatriz?" The man's voice was hoarse, filled with emotion. Do you have news of my daughter?" "I do, sir, and I believe it's the news you've been waiting for 35 years." Gabriel heard a muffled cry and running footsteps. Moments later, a female voice answered the phone. "This is Marina Ribeiro. What did you tell my husband? He's crying and can't speak." "Mrs. Marina, I have reason to believe we have found Ana Beatriz." The phone dropped. Gabriel waited patiently until Carlos Eduardo returned to the line, visibly trying to control himself. How can we be sure? We've been fooled before." "I have documents, photographs, and a story that fits perfectly with Ana Beatriz's disappearance. But most importantly, I have a 35-year-old woman who was raised in an orphanage under the name Carol Adams and who has a star-shaped birthmark." The silence that followed was broken only by sobs on the other end of the line. Where is she?" "In Willow Creek. And Mr. Carlos Eduardo, there's something else you need to know. Ana Beatriz, Carol, has a 4-year-old daughter, a girl named Emily." "A granddaughter," Marina whispered, who had managed to get close enough to hear. "We have a granddaughter." "What happens now?" Carlos Eduardo asked. "If you want, I can arrange a meeting. But I need to warn you, Carol is nervous. She grew up believing she had been abandoned. Discovering that you exist and have never stopped looking for her it's a lot to process." "We're coming there now," Carlos Eduardo said immediately. "Sir, maybe it's better to do this gradually. Let me talk to her first, prepare the meeting properly." "How long will that take?" "A few days, a week at most." "All right. But Gabriel, please tell our girl that we never stopped loving her." "Not for a day." When Gabriel called to report the conversation, he found Carol in a state of total panic. She had spent the previous night vomiting from nervousness and hadn't been able to eat anything for breakfast. "They want to see me," she said, not as a question but as a statement of an inevitable fact. "They really want to. Gabriel said they cried for an hour after the call." Theodore said, "What if I'm not their daughter? What if it's just a cruel coincidence?" "Carol," Sophia said gently, "you saw the photograph. She's identical to you. Photographs can be deceiving. But 35 years of searching don't lie," Theodore said. "These people have loved you without even knowing if you were alive. That's no coincidence." Emily, who was playing in the backyard but clearly paying attention to the adults' conversation, came into the room with a drawing in her hands. "Mom, Carol, I made a drawing of our big family. The paper showed a huge house with smiling people holding hands in front of it." Carol counted 8 figures. "Who are all these people?" "You, me, Uncle Theodore, Heart-Mother Sophia, and the other grandparents who are going to meet me. Aren't you afraid of having so many people in the family?" "Why would I be afraid? The more people who love me, the safer I feel." Emily's simple wisdom touched Carol deeply. If a 4-year-old could accept such family complexity with joy, maybe she could too. "All right," she said finally, "I'm going to meet with them." The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at Gabriel's office. Neutral space, controlled environment, with the possibility of a quick exit if emotions became unbearable. Carol spent the 2 days leading up to it alternating between extreme anxiety and attempts to calm down. Sophia stayed at the house, offering emotional support, while Theodore took care of the practical aspects, ensuring that Emily felt safe amid the adults' emotional turmoil. "Mom, do you want me to come with you?" Emily asked on Friday night. "No, honey. This first meeting is just for adults. But can I meet my other grandparents later?" "If all goes well, yes." "It will go well. I'm sure of it. How can you be sure? Because when people love each other, it always works out in the end. On Saturday morning, Carol, Theodore, and Sophia traveled to New York City in near total silence. Carol wore a blue dress, her favorite color as a child, according to the photographs Gabriel had shown her. When they arrived at the office, Carlos Eduardo and Marina were already there. Gabriel had advised them to arrive early to calm down before the meeting. Carol saw them through the glass door of the office and stopped breathing. The man had completely white hair and brown eyes identical to hers. The woman was small, delicate, with a face that showed decades of hope and suffering. "It's them," she whispered. "Are you sure?" Theodore asked. "I am. I don't know how, but I am." Gabriel opened the door and made the formal introductions, but the words were lost in the emotional intensity of the moment. Carlos Eduardo and Marina looked at Carol as if they were seeing a ghost materialize. 35 years of pain, hope, and lost dreams were concentrated in that look. "Ana Beatriz?" Marina whispered. "My name is Carol now," she said, her voice trembling. Do you remember us?" Carlos Eduardo asked. "No, sorry, I don't remember anything before I was 3 years old." "That's okay," Marina said quickly. "The important thing is that you're here." Can I hug you?" Carlos Eduardo asked. Carol nodded, and when her father's arms enveloped her, something deep stirred in her emotional memory. They weren't visual memories, but sensations, security, warmth, unconditional love. Marina joined the hug, and the three remained like that for long minutes, decades of separation being healed in a moment of pure connection. "Sorry," Marina sobbed. "Sorry for not being able to protect you." "You didn't do anything wrong," Carol said. "It was the bad people who separated us. We never stopped looking," Carlos Eduardo said. "We never gave up." "I know. Gabriel told me." "And did you have a good life?" Marina asked, clearly fearing the answer. "There were difficult times," Carol admitted, "but there was also love, and now I have a beautiful family." That's when she remembered to introduce Theodore and Sophia. "This is Theodore, my adoptive father. And this is Sophia, the heart mother of my daughter." "Daughter?" Marina's eyes lit up. "Emily, she's 4 years old and the most special child in the world." "Can we meet her?" Carlos Eduardo asked. "You can. She's eager to meet her new grandparents." Over the next 2 hours, stories were shared. Carlos Eduardo and Marina told about the years of searching, the detectives hired, the false hopes. Carol told about her life in the orphanage, her fears, her struggles, and especially about Emily and how the girl had changed her life. "She sounds amazing," Marina said. "I can't wait to meet her." "There's something you need to know," Carol said. "Our family is untraditional. Emily has 2 mothers, 2 grandfathers, and now she's going to have great-grandparents too. It may seem confusing, but for her, it's natural. Family is family," Carlos Eduardo said. "It doesn't matter how it's formed. And do you want to be part of our messy life?" "We want to be part of any life that includes you," Marina said without hesitation. When they left the office, Carol felt strangely complete. It wasn't the feeling of finding something lost, but of expanding something that already existed. "How do you feel?" Sophia asked during the trip back. "Like all the pieces are finally falling into place," Carol replied. "And you?" "Like our family has become even stronger," Theodore said. "Emily is going to be ecstatic," Sophia said. "She will." She loved the idea of having great-grandparents. When they arrived in Willow Creek, they found Emily waiting on the porch with Mrs. Gable, wearing her best dress and holding a drawing. "How did it go? Are they nice? Can I meet them now?" "It went very well, honey. And yes, they're very nice. They're coming to visit us tomorrow." "I made a drawing for them," Emily said, showing the paper. "It's our whole family together." The drawing showed a house even bigger than the previous one, with 10 smiling figures in front and a giant rainbow over them all. That night, while Emily slept peacefully, the 3 adults talked about how their lives had changed in recent months. "Who would have thought that a girl asking for bread in the trash would lead to all this?" Theodore commented. Destiny has mysterious ways of fixing what has been broken, Carol said. And of proving that family isn't about blood or circumstances, Sophia added. It's about choosing to love and be loved. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Carlos, Eduardo and Marina couldn't sleep, planning how to win the heart of the granddaughter they would meet the next day and how to rebuild 35 years of lost relationship with the daughter they never stopped loving. The family that had begun with a tragedy was about to become something much bigger and more beautiful than any of them had ever dreamed. A year later, the Blue House on Palm Street had turned into something none of them could have imagined when it all started. The backyard that once housed only a lonely man feeding pigeons now echoed constantly with laughter, conversation, and the sound of a truly united family. It was Emily's 5th birthday, and for the first time in her life, she would have a real party, with all the people she loved gathered in one place. "How many candles do you want on the cake?" Marina asked, who had become the most dedicated heart grandmother Emily could have wished for. 5, Grandma Marina. 1 for each year I've lived with Mom Carol. Carlos Eduardo, sitting on the porch watching the activity, smiled at the answer. In recent months, he'd learned that Emily measured her life not by the years she spent in the world, but by the years she spent being loved. It was a wisdom that he and Marina had taken decades to understand. "Grandpa Carlos, are you going to teach me to fish today?" Emily asked, running to him. "Of course, little one, right after lunch." Fishing had become the special activity they shared. Every Sunday, Carlos Eduardo took Emily to the small lake on the outskirts of Willow Creek, where she talked more than she fished, telling about her discoveries of the week and asking questions about everything she saw. Theodore watched from the kitchen window, where he helped Carol prepare the birthday lunch. The relationship between his daughter and her biological parents had developed naturally and beautifully, without competition or jealousy. "Are you happy?" he asked Carol. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, seasoning the salad. "And you?" "I'm fulfilled. Completely fulfilled." It was true. Theodore had spent his whole life pursuing business success, accumulating wealth, and achieving professional recognition. But it was only by forming this unconventional family that he understood what a well-lived life really meant. "Dad Theodore," Carol said. She had started calling him that after the meeting with Carlos Eduardo and Marina, a way to distinguish her two fathers without diminishing either of them. "Thank you for being brave that day in the square. Thank you for letting me be part of your life." Sophia came into the kitchen, carrying the gifts she had brought for Emily. Her relationship with her daughter had evolved into something natural and healthy. Emily called her Heart Mom Sophia, and clearly loved having two mothers, especially when one of them could intercede for her when the other was being too strict about bedtime or the amount of candy. "Can I help with something?" Sophia asked. "You can finish decorating the cake," Carol said. "Emily asked for colorful birds." "Of course she did," Sophia laughed. "She still draws birds every day. But now they're happy birds," Theodore observed. "No more those sad birds she drew when we found her." Emily's birds had become a perfect metaphor for the transformation of their lives. From trapped and suffering creatures, they had become symbols of freedom and joy. "Family!" Emily shouted from the backyard. "Come see!" Everyone ran out and found the girl pointing to the sky, where a family of robins had landed in the oak tree. "Look, there's a mommy, a daddy, and a baby robin, just like our family." Marina laughed. "Our family is a little more complicated than that, sweetheart." "It's not complicated," Emily said with the seriousness she always showed when talking about family. "It's just big, and big is better." During lunch, a tradition that had been established in recent months was that each member of the family would tell something they were grateful for that week. "Me first," Emily said. "I'm grateful because Heart Mom Sophia taught me how to make bracelets," and because Grandpa Carlos showed me how fish breathe underwater, and because Grandma Marina made star-shaped cookies, and because Grandpa Theodore let me help plant flowers, and because Mom Carol read me 5 stories yesterday." Everyone laughed at Emily's abundant gratitude. "My turn," Marina said. "I'm grateful for having recovered my daughter and for having gained a granddaughter who teaches me something new every day." "I'm grateful," Carlos Eduardo said, "for discovering that it's never too late to start a family." "I'm grateful," Sophia said, "for having found the courage to look for my daughter and for having discovered that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose to form together." "I'm grateful," Theodore said, "for having learned that loneliness isn't about being alone, but about not having people to love." "And I," Carol said, "I'm grateful for every person at this table, for every twist and turn that brought us here, and for having learned that family isn't about perfection, but about staying together despite all the imperfections." After lunch, while Emily opened her gifts in the backyard, the adults gathered on the porch to observe the girls' joy. "Do you realize the miracle that happened here?" Marina asked. "What do you mean?" Sophia said. "We were all broken people in some way. Theodore lost his wife and never had children. Carol grew up without a family. Sophia lost a daughter. Carlos Eduardo and I lost our daughter, and Emily was abandoned as a baby." "It's true," Carlos Eduardo agreed. "But look at us now. Not only are we healed, but we've created something more beautiful than any traditional family could be." "How do you think we did that?" Carol asked. "Because we stopped trying to fix the past and started building the future," Theodore replied. "And because a 4-year-old girl taught us that love has no limit," Sophia added. Emily, who had stopped playing with her gifts to listen to the adults' conversation, approached the group. "Are you talking about serious things again?" "We're talking about how lucky we are to have found each other," Carol explained. "It wasn't luck," Emily said with conviction. "Wasn't it?" "No, it was love. The love of my first mom that led me to you, Mom Carol, and your love that brought everyone together." Once again, Emily's wisdom silenced the adults. "And you know what else?" she continued. "What, honey?" "Now our family is complete. There's no one else missing." "How do you know?" "Because there's no room in my heart for more love. It's all full." That night, after Emily fell asleep, exhausted but happy after her best birthday, the 6 adults sat on the porch under the stars. "Do you think she's right?" Sophia asked. "That our family is complete?" "I think family is never really complete," Marina said. "There's always room for more love." "But maybe," Carol said, "Emily is referring to another kind of completeness. Not about quantity, but about quality. About feeling whole," Carlos Eduardo agreed. "About not needing to look for anything else because you've already found everything you needed," Theodore added. As they talked, none of them noticed that Emily had woken up and was watching them from her bedroom window. The girl smiled as she saw all the people she loved gathered, talking softly under the starlight. In her 5 years of life, she had experienced abandonment, fear, insecurity, and loss. But she had also discovered that these painful experiences could be transformed into something beautiful when they found the right people. She went back to bed and picked up her drawing book. On the last page, she made a final drawing, a huge house under a starry sky with 8 smiling figures in front, all holding hands. At the top of the page, she wrote in her still childish handwriting, "My complete family." It was the drawing of a girl who had learned that family isn't about being born in the right place, but about being loved by the right people, and that sometimes the best stories are the ones that start with pain but end with love. A love so abundant that it overflows and heals not only those who receive it, but also those who give it. In the blue house on Palm Street, an unconventional but deeply united family had proven that destiny, however cruel it may be, always finds ways to fix what has been broken, to reunite what has been separated, and to transform sad endings into happy beginnings. And for Emily, who fell asleep listening to the sound of the voices of the people who loved her, that was exactly the type of ending that a little girl who had already suffered too much deserved to have. An ending full of love, security, and the absolute certainty that she would never be alone again. The story that began with tears of pain had transformed into tears of joy, proving that sometimes when love is true and people are brave enough to build bridges over the chasms of the past, miracles really do happen.